Today, most of us here in the community spent the afternoon over at the Frey Ranch, the Frey Vineyards, just down the street a couple of miles, attending the memorial service for Daniel Frey, who passed away a little more than a month ago. Very good friend of the monastery, close supporter. Came here a couple of times a week, often, and died at the young age of, I think, right around 40. This was sort of the culmination of a number of different remembrances of him, gatherings. When he first passed away, and they kept the body for a few days at the house, there was large numbers of people coming and going, and then for the cremation, a few weeks after that, a fairly good-sized gathering, and then the official memorial service today in the redwood grove on their property. So it was a very beautiful setting, beautiful weather, many, many people there gathered in the redwoods to remember Daniel and offer their reflections and many songs. He was a musician, so had a lot of people musically adept, musically inclined, who shared their memories of him in words and in song. Sometimes I go to these kinds of events, out of a sense of duty. But this was very different. It was a very much, he was so close a part of our community that it was just really a remembrance and celebration of his life. And I found it very a great way to spend a few hours in the afternoon to just remember him. And contemplate the suddenness of his passing, unexpectedness, and using it as a tool for personal reflection. We've done a lot of that the past month, and I'm always hesitant to oversaturate our reflections around the theme of death. Is I don't want people to think that we're just, kind of focusing on what some people feel is sort of a negative perception. But as we all know, the Buddha really stressed contemplation of death, maranasati, as very, very important reflection to keep fresh daily, actually. To help keep us focused on what's important and to live our lives in a way that we're essentially preparing ourselves for this. The Ajahn Chah in Ajahn Chah monasteries, but when people would come to Ajahn Chah an Ajahn Chah monastery, oftentimes, at least as the story goes, he would say to them, "Have you come here to die?" And then another phrase of contemplation he would offer is "Die before you die." So, we have the physical body contemplation of death, but then Ajahn Chah's pointing, I think more, in my mind anyway, he's pointing more towards when he says, "Have you come here to die?" Not the physical body per se, but the death, trying to excuse me. Trying to die from all that we cling to, that we hold to, trying to allow our sense of self, our sense of clinging, to die before we actually physically die. Die before you die. Is that what we've come to the monastery for? To let go of what it is that we hold to so strongly, that we don't want to stop clinging sometimes. So to really examine that and see what it is, contemplate what it is that we hold on to, that we cling to. As we know, clinging is the craving and clinging are the basic causes for suffering, for dukkha. And release from that craving, as the chant goes in the Dhammacakka Sutta, the release from that very craving, clinging, is our freedom. The experiencing the end of dukkha when we experience the end of craving and clinging. So to use moments of physical death, the death of this physical body, as a way to help steer us towards really examining what it is that we're clinging on to. What do we have still that we want to and need to let go of before we actually take our last breath in this physical body? When I was many, many years ago, as a layman before I took ordination, I was taking I was volunteering for a certain hospice-type organization as a volunteer, and we went through a training where there was a guided death meditation, and it was very long and involved, a very powerful one, and kind of the culmination was as you were nearing your last breath. What is it that is the most difficult, most painful? In a sense, what is it? What are you holding on to most closely? And of course, different people have different things that they cling to and hold to and occupy their minds, occupy their hearts. At that time, anyway, the prominent one for me was clinging to family and friends. The hard part being saying goodbye, separation from the loved, essentially. So that was a very powerful insight at that time, and helped me kind of steer in the right direction towards what it is that how I need to lessen my attachments in those areas. And of course, there are other attachments that come when you work on letting go of one. It's not doesn't all happen at once. Other ones spring up too, as did for me. But it's so useful to really take that to heart and to look at it, look at what it is that we cherish so dearly. And what is the basis, the fruit for our constant rebirth into this world, rebirth into, this moment, into this existence. How we experience the force of becoming, the becoming process. And how that holds us in the realm of samsara, the realm of dukkha. And what do we want to let go of at the time of our death, by the time of our death? The death of the physical body. There's all sorts of things that people can cling to, maybe people who haven't practiced Dhamma or taken a very strong spiritual training or attitude in life, may find that their clinging is more along the lines of the material realm, possessions, sensuality, kind of the areas where there's gratification, but pretty short term. Nothing that's very lasting. And I would suspect that most of us here who have adopted more of a spiritual perspective, have less of that, although we probably still have some around possessions and materiality, but along more of the lines of personal, social ways of being. Again, family, friends, like what mine was when we went through that meditation. And other kind of more, maybe subtler internal attachments, even as monastics, still working with issues along the lines of some of the more subtle worldly winds, praise and blame, reputation, or trying to avoid ill repute, the need for validation from external sources, the need for recognition, approval. These are some of the underlying qualities that I think many of us can still get caught up in. So we kind of start subtly gearing our lives around this kind of clinging, even though it's not recognized as such when it's happening, until we maybe don't get it, don't get that praise, don't get that support, or don't get that recognition. We try and maybe craft our lives around doing things or producing things or being in certain ways that will be recognized and that we receive some sort of support from. So we need to kind of start really looking at that, I think, if we want to be truly free, truly independent of the ups and downs of the world, so that when it does come time for the physical body to pass, then we can do so with a much cleaner, clearer freedom in the heart. So it's worth thinking about, it's worth contemplating about. What am I holding on to? What is it? Where does my mind go when it's looking for security, support, a sense of refuge? Will I be able to take that with me into whatever comes next? And allowing oneself to experience the unsatisfactoriness of that, to let it register in the heart, in awareness. That's the first noble truth. The duty of the first noble truth, to understand the suffering and to realize the second noble truth of where it's coming from, where is the craving, what is being clung to. That's the letting go of that. The full release of that is the third noble truth. So really, the path of practice, the Noble Eightfold Path, should be one that's engaged on and taken up with this whole attitude, this whole sphere of keeping the perspective of release, of relinquishment through it all. So, we develop all the various aspects of the path, the sila part, the right speech, right action, right livelihood. Of course, for the purpose of the non-harming and the peacefulness it brings, or the lack of regret, and the goodness, the actual goodness that it brings into the world, with appropriate right speech, right action, and how we manifest our lives in the world, what we pick up to do in our livelihoods. And those all bring very good things into the world, and can be cultivated for that, but to expand it beyond the effects that it has in the world, and to use them to use that part of the path for release, with the motivation of allowing it to be the foundation for letting go and release. The same with the rest of the Eightfold Path. That understanding, that right view, that cause and effect, that how we live our lives, what we do actually has results, and we can steer that towards that. The other aspects of the path, the right livelihood, right speech, right action, in a way that we know will have an effect, but also keeping that in mind, the final goal of release. And the right intention, developing kindness, loving kindness, and lack of cruelty, compassion, simplicity, renunciation, not just for the immediate benefits of those, but again, keeping in that mind the development of these qualities that will ultimately lead into the full release, letting go. And of course, the aspects of right effort, right mindfulness, right samadhi, samma samadhi, right collectedness, right composure of mind, with that goal in mind. The Buddha talks about particularly the development of the faculty of samadhi, samma samadhi, the full development being with release as its object. Bodhisattva in that case. Many different words that describe relinquishment or release, bodhisattva in that particular situation. So, like even with our meditation and the development of samadhi, it's actually clear that the Buddha wasn't directing us to developing a very narrow focus, just to develop an exclusion of the world around us and limiting us to a particular narrow, small, pinpoint type object or perception, but one that is all-encompassing and that can lead to release. So the qualities of sati sampajanya are so important in the development of the path. We use mindfulness to develop a theme for how we want to contemplate our lives and what we want to keep as the focus, all in line with the Eightfold Path. And the quality of sampajanya, clear understanding, clear knowledge, clear knowing, direct knowing as our focus, so that we don't get too narrowly focused or too caught up in minutia. As we learn to let go and learn to release that which we're holding on to, and that's which we cling to, even those very subtle underlying tendencies towards whatever it is that gives us a sense of temporary refuge. We work to recognize those and to release those as well, even the skillful ones. And as we can see more subtly all the ways that we hold to the various aspects of our world, and that we cling to them, and where we're looking for refuge. We see through that clarity of mind, that clarity of the heart, the stilling of all the activity that usually distracts us, and we see what it is that where the mind goes out to grab hold of some thought, some emotion, some opinion, some view, something that will get us some sort of recognition or happiness, contentment, security. We see that more clearly, and we see that it's just not worth it. It's not worth it. Do we want to keep doing that over and over and over again? Eventually with clarity, you see that it, as one of the Buddhas, the Buddha was asked once to describe in just a phrase the basic thrust of his teaching, and his answer was, nothing whatsoever should be clung to. So we start to really actually realize that and see that, and everything that arises that the mind is moved towards or is averse to on the opposite side, we let go of that. We don't hold on to it so long. We see it more quickly, and we allow our hearts to release it, to not cling to it. Ajahn Sumedho used to say, if it moves, don't believe it. In that, in the chant that we often do, the Dhammacakka Sutta, the description of the ending of dukkha is related to releasing ourselves from the clinging, the cause, or the craving. And he uses four descriptors: chago, patinissago, mutti, and alayo. Chago, the giving up, the giving over, the handing over. It's not just chaga in terms of generosity, of giving through generosity, although that's one of the uses of the word term, but of the term also. But chaga, fully giving over everything that it is that we're holding on to, fully passing on what it is that we're clinging to. Patinissago is another one of the words for relinquishment. So you can kind of see it as almost like a gesture, handing over chaga, and then relinquishment is opening the hand, letting it go, letting it move on, releasing it, and then mutti is the actual experience of release, of freedom. So we experience that freedom when we give it over and relinquish it, let it go, open the grip. We experience freedom. And then analayo, non-attachment, so that eventually we can get to that point where we just don't even pick it up again. Something comes through us, some old perceptual tendency passes through the mind, and as we perfect the path of non-clinging, we just don't pick it up. Analayo, non-attachment. I was thinking, some of this was stimulated by the service today, and Daniel himself was a great composer of many songs, which I actually only heard just a little bit of every now and then. Mostly didn't experience that part of him. Obviously, we don't have a lot of music happening here at the monastery, so when he came, that wasn't part of the experience. But we got some good hits of that today. And a couple of people who were close musician friends of his recorded one of his songs. And I don't have a good memory for, of course, all the lyrics, but there was a refrain in there that was quite astounding, actually, and quite powerful insight, and just in a very simple poetic way that made me kind of realize that he was very deeply reflective, and I'm not sure where he picked up this particular refrain from, whether it was from some of his other spiritual interests. He had quite a eclectic palette of spiritual practices and yogic practices as well, and obviously coming to the monastery a couple of times a week, he really cherished the Buddhist perspective and made much use of it. But one of the lines in this song was, let's see if I can remember it now. Peace as presence, love as the substance for being. And I really, it moved me, it caught my ear as quite a beautiful way of considering two aspects of our reality, of our experience, as the Buddha might describe it, I think. And taking the second one first, love as the substance of being. Being, becoming, we're still existing in the world, the thrust of samsara, the rolling on of the fabricated world, the created world, the world of being. But that to fully perfect ourselves in the realm of existence, in the realm of samsara, we can develop love as the substance of our existence. Love as this substance of being. Because it's often taught that loving kindness, metta, is perhaps one of the most powerful ways of existing. If we have to exist in some realm, one of the most powerful and appropriate places to dwell is in loving kindness. Similarly, of course, to the other Brahmaviharas, compassion, sympathetic joy, and in my mind, the penultimate of equanimity, which can contain all of those lofty emotional states of love and compassion, joy, but with a strong dose of wisdom. But the Buddha talks mostly, really, in the suttas, in the teachings, of that loving kindness, and how useful it is to employ that as our sublime abiding. This is our sublime abiding. This is said to be the sublime abiding. So love as the substance for being. And then more that's kind of on the immanent level, the manifest level, and then on the more transcendent level of peace as peace as presence, as he expressed it in that song. If you think of the quality of presence as this kind of very strong clarity of mind, clearly comprehending, the alertness that comes with the full development of path, the full presence. We're not developing a kind of peacefulness or a kind of concentration that shuts out anything, but is all-inclusive, fully knowledgeable, fully aware, at the same time that we're not holding, we're not clinging. We're experiencing everything that comes in through our senses, including our hearts and our minds, and we're seeing it with utmost alertness and clarity, presence. But then the full development of that with non-clinging is peace. It's the ultimate peace, the full peace of complete relinquishment, the peace of nibbana, really. So peace as presence. So we want to die before we die. We want to let go of everything that's helping to create a definition of who we are, creating that sense of self, that conceiving of I am, the death of the ego is our task. It's what we're here to develop and release from. Develop that understanding and release ourselves from the trap of I am, of clinging, of holding to any ways of becoming, of being. Nibbana is the cessation of becoming. So anyway, I'm not sure that there's much more to say, but just felt quite moved and quite, moved. I guess moved by Daniel's clarity at times. He wasn't. There were times when he certainly was struggling and didn't have his clear moments, and sometimes some self-doubt and questioning about how he was dealing with certain things in his life, but. He also was incredibly present and reflective, and I just found that particular phrase so moving as a source of contemplation for myself. Peace as presence, and love as the substance for being. So just taking that, something to chew on, something to reflect on, bring into one's contemplation as one develops this path towards freedom. So I'll leave that just for a short reflection this evening. Reflection this evening. Reflection this evening. Reflection this evening.